Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I've been given this great privilege to welcome you on behalf of LifeWatch ERIC. It's also a great pleasure because after our last in-person conference in 2019 in Rome, we have this great pleasure to welcome again you in person. We have this pleasure to see your presentations, the progress that you have done, and discuss during the sessions, but also during the coffee breaks and the lunches. We have a great agenda, as you have seen in our webpage. We have a good event tonight. We're going to drive you through the gardens of the Real Alcázar here in Seville. So it's, I think that we have all the good settings for a great conference. Therefore, in order to keep the time as short as possible, I will call my colleague Javier Lopez to give you a few details on the logistics, and then I would, at the same time, I would ask kindly my colleague Dr. Cristina Huertas-Olivares to take her seat as the chair of the first session. And by this, I'm giving the floor to Javier. Peter? Okay, Javier. Thank you.
Thank you, Christos. Just for logistics and facilities issues, remember that the toilets are outside of the meeting room at the left side. Emergency exit is the main entrance of the meeting room. Lunch and coffee breaks will be served at Patio de la Fuente, just downstairs in the second courtyard that you can find by walking. Today at 4 p.m. is a guided tour scheduled, and you can book your assistant if you want at the front desk in the main entrance. And also this evening, as Christos said, the social venue at Real Alcázar is at 8 p.m. The meeting point is the door in Patio de Banderas, and please be on time because the Real Alcázar is only open for us tonight. So thank you and welcome again.
Welcome everybody. It's 10 o'clock and I'm going to be the facilitator for the first session of the morning. We have two topics in this first session of the conference. The first topic is macroecological and biogeographical approaches to biodiversity and conservation, and we have 4 speakers. I will ask the 4 speakers to take a seat next to me here, and then they will do the presentations from this computer or with a microphone. We have 1 speaker missing. So each of the speakers will have 12 minutes presentation and then 3 minutes for questions. For the questions, I will kindly ask you to stand up, say your name and your affiliation. So we will start for the first speech. It is on a hot topic that is the digital twins in virtual research environments. Our first speaker is the Dean of the Faculty of Science of the University of Amsterdam and is the director of one of our common facilities of LifeWatch ERIC. Welcome to the floor, Mr. Peter van Tienderen.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me in the back? Is it okay? So thank you, Cristina. One of my tasks also is to make this meeting a little bit less formal. I think we're all impressed by this audience. What a wonderful place. I can't remember that I've been in a place like this. But the risk is that everyone says, and there is not enough discussion. So please feel free to react to everything that is presented by us and stand up and ask questions afterwards, so that we really have a lively meeting. So that's why I'm also walking here rather than sitting there behind the microphone. So let's see. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the plans that we have in the Netherlands to build digital twins. So that's the topic of today. It is a plan that was submitted last year to the government and got granted. So for the next 10 years, we will be working on this in the Netherlands. So hopefully after this short presentation, it's also an invitation to you to react and to connect, and that will also be important. Yes. So let's start with this, the bending the curve of biodiversity loss. It is a picture that we all know, that it's not going in the right direction, and that really actions need to be taken in order to proceed and make this a better situation for biodiversity. So the lower line is business as usual. The middle line is what we can do with conservation, and the top line is what we can do not only by conservation, but also taking into account all kinds of economic measures that we can take. And so we're pretty far from the situation that is desirable. So how can we make sure that we go in the right direction? Understanding the ecosystem dynamics is a focal point for that. I think we really need to know more about how systems will react to change, whether it's human-induced change or natural change, and what the results will be for biodiversity. So this is an actual picture in the Netherlands. There's a lot of discussion about the wolf. The wolf was not reintroduced, but the wolf came by itself, but now it's causing problems. And people are opposing the presence of the wolf in the Netherlands. But the picture also shows is that, especially in a country like the Netherlands, we want to do lots of things in a very small space. It's not only nature, it's not only biodiversity, it's also the wolf, it's also recreation, it's also agriculture, it's also build-up environment. So one of the questions there is also how can we combine these in an optimal way, and making measures that make sure that the system goes in the right direction. So that is a big challenge to do that. Destination Earth puts it like this. The solution will have to come from the approach that we analyze the past, monitor the present to predict the future. So that's also the motto for our project. That will not be easy, and especially it will not be easy if you want to do this for the entire world. So the focus that we adopted in the Netherlands is that we specifically focus on areas. That we say, well, we want to develop cases, user cases that are very location specific. So not for the entire world, but for a real ecosystem in the environment, including the human environment. So it's a location specific. We want to combine biotic, abiotic, and societal data, build interaction models, so that is the hard part, so that we know how systems will react when you change something. So for that we need to know the interrelations between what humans do, what the interactions between species are, and how that will evolve if we change something. It will be based on common VRE architecture. So we're creating a virtual research architecture to allow these systems to be analyzed and to allow that we can run scenarios on real scenarios in real world systems. And last but not least, that we will do this together with stakeholders. Not only politicians, but also citizens and also companies that may be involved. So starting for user cases, we will start developing digital twins. We will work on capacity building, and the last bit is that we will generate output from that. So these are the work packages that are in the program. So it's also an invitation to you to say, well, I think this is a nice approach. The VRE will be generic. So the aim is that we will build a system that can be copied more or less to another situation in another country with other data, other kinds of data, other kinds of problem. But the architecture is ready. And that is also the goal of this project, so that we can really work together and copy them one by one and create an impact all over the world by creating these digital twins. The two locations we selected, the first one is the Wadden Sea, very important place for migratory birds, for instance, but also a place where there's a lot of recreation, impact of seawater rise is there, fisheries are there, so there's another example of how can we combine these things also to ensure that it is not at the cost of biodiversity. The second one is the Veluwe. The Veluwe is an area in the middle, highlands, sandy deposits from the ice ages, fairly poor. The wolf is there, for instance, and doing well. And there the problems are different. The problem is how can you combine this with agriculture? What do you do with drought? Drought is an increasing problem in these situations in the Netherlands. Even in the Netherlands we have a problem with drought. So this is what we're going to do. And this is sort of the general assets that we're going to create. The top layer are the catalog of the models and the tools that we will make available, all kinds of data, of course, taking into account fair principles that we have to be findable, accessible, and reusable, etc. But most of all, also by joining expertise in a system like this, based on a virtual research environment, based on that the ability to have a real copy, a digital twin copy of this area, so that we can run scenarios and eventually arrive at predictive ecology. That's our goal. So that we can see, well, if we do this intervention, this will happen to the system, not only in biodiversity, but also in other parameters. That is the goal. How am I doing on time?
Very good.
We're
We're fine. 8 minutes yet.
Okay. Yeah. This is the consortium that we have created. I work in the design of the project, so I'm not really one of the BEeS. So it unites many different people, many different universities, and I'm very proud that worked out. That we're such a big group of good people who are working on these problems. And the people that know LifeWatch will probably know that, especially Cristina, the third person, and Daniel Priesling of the University of Amsterdam are also part of the LifeWatch organization. And the others are experts, they are really experts in biology, marine biology, terrestrial biology. They have expertise in AI, or in developing infrastructure, or they are making programs in R, Python, or whatever they do. So the consortium is very nice. Below you see the participants. It's a combination of 3 research infrastructures in the Netherlands that have joined forces. So LifeWatch in the Netherlands is not one single entity, it is a combination. The combination is with ELTER, so long-term ecological research networks, and it's a combination of what is called NetNet. So it's the network of monitoring of all kinds of parameters in the Netherlands that is done by the ministry, one of the ministries of the Netherlands. So they're all united now, and there's a lot of work to do. So that's the goal. So hopefully in the future you will see more of this. You can look at the website, it is just launch.elterlife.nl. In the end, we will try also to make sure that we have the international connection, so that you can put your name down and say you are interested in a newsletter, for instance, so that you will get updates on the progress of how this digital twinning will develop. Major challenge, but I'm looking forward to all the results, and I think it's a big success that we can do this in the Netherlands, and hopefully the impact will be a lot bigger than that. So with that, I would like to end. Thank you for your attention, and I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for doing your presentation on time. And now, if you would like to raise your hand, and Peter will take the questions.
Who has a question? Don't be shy. Don't be shy. So that's now the first one. If no one asks questions, I will select someone and hold the microphone for you. That's a threat that I'll have. So. Who's interested? Yeah, first here and then there. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, from LifeWatch Belgium. I was wondering about the scale of the ecosystem models that you are running.
What is the scale of the models that we're running? I think we are trying to do this at landscape scale. So we selected an area that is interesting, where lots of data is already present. There are the models that are already available, for instance, in hydrology. We have fairly good models for that, both in the Veluwe and the Wadden with sea level rise in the areas of high and low. That scale is already available. Satellite imaging is, of course, as you know, is also available at that scale. But we want to combine that with case studies that are very detailed. See how are organisms using that landscape for their functioning. There's a lot of great tips work being done in the Veluwe for many years. The monitoring of the Netherlands Institute for Sea Research has also lots of data already at that scale. So basically, landscape scale is the goal. Okay?
May I kindly ask you to speak louder to the questions? Thanks.
Yes, well, I'm Karl Bayer from the University of Bayreuth. I'm a biogeographer, so I'm also interested in space. You already spoke about landscapes, because normally twins are individuals. So like one community, one population, one ecosystem maybe, and process-based models are not often really spatial. So spatial modeling, of course, I think is really important for future control because, well, now in your answer you spoke about remote sensing. I think that's linking with Copernicus, with Sentinel options would allow for controlling the quality of the output because you don't know whether it's a real twin or whether it's just a fake twin.
Yeah, that's a good point, and the accuracy of what you create is also a thing, of course, that you need to take care of. And so I think you need remote sensing, maybe local observations, and maybe a combination of that also to have the right checks and balancing that what you see is also confirmed in the field. You can confirm it. One of the main things is also that spatial planning is very important in the Netherlands. It's not that we have one big nature reserve that we can do everything with. You need to combine it with all kinds of other activities that also need to take place. And where do you do that and how much is extremely important. So can we predict the impact of those changes if we do something here, what will happen somewhere else? And I agree that scale and landscapes are extremely important for that, to make sure that you have a somewhat more holistic view on the system rather than looking at the wolf or birds like grey tits or whatever you're interested in. Yeah. Thank you.
We have time for more questions.
Over there, I'm running.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Katrina Heil and I come from the Elixir infrastructure. I have a bit of a different question. So how do you make sure that the people that are involved are actually speaking to each other and that the projects are moving in the right direction for everybody?
You mean within the project or with the stakeholders outside? Yeah. So within the project, I think we have great work packages. There's a great enthusiasm among people, older people, developers, as well as scientists. So I'm pretty confident that there's a lot of energy in that. Involvement of the stakeholders will take place in step by step. When we start developing something, it will be together with stakeholders. One of the surprising things that we noticed is when we started writing the proposal, that the Ministry of Agriculture immediately funded part of that. So they saw the relevance of making sure that we have regional plans rather than something that's extremely global, because they have to realize that there is a problem. There's a problem with farmers, or with drought, or with recreation, or whatever. And they really want to develop local solutions with the people that are there, and also with policy and with citizens. So, and we'll make sure the fourth or the third part of that figure was also capacity building, and that's also very important for that. Okay, good point. Thank you.
More questions? Okay.
Thanks.
Where is at the University of Tartu, Estonia. Your study sites are quite natural compared to other. Biodiversity lives in urban areas, in industrial areas, in agricultural areas. Can these digital twins be expanded to the areas as well?
Yeah, the infrastructure is sort of agnostic of the system, so in that sense it can be modified. It would be very interesting also to see, for instance, if we can make a plan that joins different cities. So there is also the 100 city initiative of the European Union. Amsterdam is one of them. I think Malaga is also one of the 100 cities. And they also want to deal with those problems. But also a combination. It's not only biodiversity, but there's also other aspects that you need to encompass in your system. The system will be agnostic. The data will be very different probably, and also the problems sometimes. But hopefully they can profit from each other.
Any other question?
Thank you. I'm a representative of Bulgarian Naval Academy. And do you have some ideas for digital twins and ecosystems in sea and water bodies? What will be the software, the database inputs and etc.?
Yeah, the technological part will be developed together with LifeWatch, of course. That's why LifeWatch is part of that. I think the best example, but I'm not a marine biologist by any chance, is reef ecology on the reefs in Australia. They have a very, very detailed system that is already available. The models that we're using will be based on some stuff that's already there, whether it's a Python or an R, but also with the system of deployment, that it can become very flexible, and that you can port it to another system on another type of hardware by, well, the people call that containers or whatever they call it, so that you can really run it independently of the hardware infrastructure that they have available. That's part of the ICT part of this project.
There is a comment.
Thanks, Peter. If I may, this year the European Union funds a lot of projects on digital twins. There is one big project, the biodiversity digital twin, which is primarily on terrestrial ecosystems, and there is the DTO bioflow, which is on the oceanic and coastal ecosystems. We are participating to both, along with our colleagues from the other countries. LifeWatch Belgium is leading DTO bioflow, so there is a lot of good contact and good points there. But we are 4 years behind, you know, so there's a lot of work to be done.
Any other question? No? Thank you very much, Peter, for the presentation. Very interesting approach for understanding the ecosystem dynamics.
Thank you all for listening. And also for the cameraman keeping track of all of us.
Before inviting the following speakers, I would like to ask Simone Guareschi, our fourth speaker that is missing in the table, to join us in the table. So now we are going to move to hear an interesting review of the damage caused by wildlife. And we have with us Miguel De Gabriel Hernando, who is researcher at the Biological Station of Doñana. Welcome.
Thank you, Cristina. Thank you, everybody, for attending this presentation. So,
Technical support.
So in this talk, I'm gonna give an overview of wildlife damages in the world as part of our research activities in the Sunhal project. So, as all we know, the world human population is continuously increasing, and this is somehow leaving less or activities, leaving less room for wildlife, and this brings an important challenge that. Many important challenges, and one important one are wildlife damage. Wildlife damage can be defined as a human-wildlife interaction in which humans, or both humans and wildlife, are negatively affected. Of course, this implies complex interactions with very different causes, damaging species, affected subject, and of course different consequences. For example, some damages are somehow one-time and unusual events, like in the example in the letters.
Technical support, please. Here.
Yeah. Sorry. So in this example, we see, as I was saying, some one-time events, unusual events, like this. In this case, a couple of woodpeckers were able to delay for several weeks the launching of the Discovery shuttle just by digging holes in the fuel deposit, many holes, and this was a damage estimated in about $1 million, just a couple of woodpeckers. A totally different example would be this case in Uganda, where the transformation of chimpanzees' habitat into sugar crops is creating a serious conflict, and it's implying the loss of human lives and a serious threat for chimpanzees and for the persistence in the area. Other damages don't imply necessarily direct loss of human lives or loss in economy, but are considered somehow damage because people suffer nuisance from, for example, this example with starlings, and are considered damage anyhow. So even with all this complexity, we wondered if we could find common patterns in the human work, at least at a coarse and global scale. So our first approach that we took is look what it says the scientific literature, with the aim of classifying the different types of wildlife damage and quantify the relative importance in research, identify the wildlife taxa causing the damage, and document the spatial patterns on wildlife damage research. At this point, we focus just on vertebrate tetrapods because their biology, their ecology, and their demography is better known. So we thought that it would be easier to identify general patterns. So what we did is a literature research in Web of Science in English language. We included, we did it in 4 hierarchical levels. In each one of them, including the word damage, plus in the level 1 we included wildlife or animal. In the level 2 we included each one of the classes of tetrapods. In the 3rd level we included each one of the orders, and in the 4th level each one of the families. At this point also including the English common names of the families. After duplicate removal, we got a database of more than 20,000 references. We had to remove false positives, many papers that had the target terms but were not related about wildlife damage, and we got a final database of around 3,000 references. What we did is to assign the metadata to this reference. We assigned the type of damage, the taxa involved, the study area, normally at country level, when not possible at region level, and also other metadata such as if they contain measures, mitigation measures, if they include estimations of the importance of the damage and all that. This time looking at the title, abstract keywords, and full text. Then we did a classification and analysis on all this, and this resulted in 6 broad categories. The classification of the damages that we found resulted in the 6 broad categories according to the human activity that is affected. The most important one is the agriculture and forestry, which include damages to crops, but also damage to timber industry. And also we found a lot of damage to biodiversity and other natural values. This category includes what the authors consider damages to ecosystems or native species. Also, another category was animal farming and fisheries, which includes not only direct attacks to farmed animals, but also disease transmission to these animals. Human health, which include personal injuries and deaths, but also zoonosis. And transport and infrastructures, which includes structural damage to buildings, for example, but also car and aircraft collisions. And finally, a less important category that included other human activities such as leisure activities. We found a total of 825 species causing damage. Most of the studies were dealing with just one species. Most of the papers were about damage of mammals. The birds was also an important group, followed by reptiles, and very few papers on damages of amphibians. In mammals, the most important group were ungulates, Artiodactyla, Rodentia, rodents, carnivores, elephants, primates, Lagomorpha, and the Protodontic order of marsupials. And in birds, the most important were the Passeriformes and Seriformes, and also Syndathiformes and Colubriformes were well represented in the literature. Interestingly, only 25 species were involved in the 50% of the publications, and only 4 species, that the wild boar, the white-tailed deer, the red deer, and the African elephant, were involved in almost a fifth of them. We don't see many difference between and when we split by categories. Again, the Artiodactyla, the main group causing the damage. Maybe the human health and animal farming fisheries, and fisheries also carnivora was an important group. And when we compare with the number of species of each group, we see that some groups like carnivora and Artiodactyla are overrepresented in the damages. Of course, we see when we look at the spatial patterns of this is a review publication, so we see a bias towards economically developed countries and also English-speaking countries. But when we have into account the number of publications corrected by the number of total publications in each country, we see that Africa and Southeast Asia gain relative importance in wildlife damage. We don't see very many differences in spatial patterns for the different damage categories. And we see the species that are somehow protagonists in each of the areas. We see that in the ungulates, especially the wild boar and deers, are the protagonists which are not threatened and increasing species, and the protagonists in the north, and large species and endangered species like the elephant and the lion are the main animals causing damage in Africa. So, as conclusion, although we have to acknowledge that this approach based on a literature set has a lot of potential bias due to the research activity of the different countries, the species interest, the human perception of what is a damage or not, we can draw some broad conclusions that will be helpful for formulating future hypotheses. We can see that the types of damage that receive more attention imply direct competitions for resources. A few species appear to cause most of the damage, and particular groups, orders, are causing almost any type of damage. A few species, including the introduced species, are damaging species worldwide, although there are some differences across countries and regions. For example, when we look at the percentage of damaging species that is decreasing, we see that in Africa, these percentages in Africa, Asia, and South America, most of the damaging species are decreasing, while in the more economically developed continents, this is almost the other way around. So this makes us think into possible an explanation of this pattern would be that there are two major drivers of wildlife damage. One would be the anthropization of natural habitats, which would be the case for decreasing and threatened species, will happen mostly in the emerging economies with growing populations which are still in the phase of transforming their wild habitats into anthropized habitats. And this is what we could call it a spillover damage, because we are living, the wildlife is running out of space, so they somehow spill over to the human interface. And the other driver would be the favorable conditions for some species that will affect mainly the increasing non-threatened species, including also introduced or invasive species, would be more the case in developed economies where this transformation of natural habitats have been for long. And this is what we could call it an opportunistic damage. We are favoring these damaging species, and the species ends up increasing in population and increasing damages. So at the end, this is we believe that this is that the convergence between the specific species traits and the human interface traits are the keys for understanding wildlife damages. Of course, this is just a brief overview based on the scientific literature, and for dig a little bit deeper into this hypothesis, we need good, accurate, and good quality data on wildlife damage, and this has to do a lot about with the next presentation of my colleague Alberto Garcia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this comprehensive review and also for keeping perfectly on time. Now we have some minutes for questions, 3 or 4 minutes for questions. I would like to start by asking you, which is your follow-up study from this?
Our follow-up study with this review would be will be to categorize what we want to categorize is the importance of each type of damage in terms of what they imply for the human activities. Give kind of a score for these activities and see and go to. Of course, we cannot do a lot of quantitative things with this data because are very biased. We see that most of the research is in economically developed countries. So we need to quantify for each of these activities. We need to quantify their importance and see what implies this bias. I don't know if you get my point. We believe that, for instance, that there are more damage in the African countries. The damage probably would be more the hypothesis would be more relevant, but they are less studied. More relevant for the population. I mean, this will be a little bit the line. And of course, with raw data, we will do more specific studies.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you. I wonder whether there are studies which are published in the grey literature or in journals, like I don't know, a snake bitten child or something that is missing while doing this through the web of science.
And could you say your name and affiliation?
Yes, sorry. My name is Montserrat Vila, and I am from the Estación Biológica de Doñana. And I have another question. Is that when classifying the impacts, you could classify them through their impact on human quality of life, which is a well-standardized way of doing it, that has been used for at least invasive species.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be the idea, to use this kind of information. The first question, we didn't include we include Web of Science includes some reports and some grey literature. That's true, but it's not complete. It's very biased. We didn't include the journal information on this kind of grey literature because it would be too much. So we think that there are a lot of bias, especially, as I was saying, spatial bias, we see, but we believe that at least, for instance, the list of the species would be more or less well represented. Maybe not the fact that, for instance, the wild boar has, I don't know if you see it here, wild boar is 237 publications, and the following is wild deer with 156. I mean, doesn't mean that the wild boar is causing more damage necessarily, but at least we know that there's something going on with them, and maybe more than with the animals that are more on the end of the list, of course. Also including the scientific literature also include the research and interest. But if we include the journals, we also include a kind of mix with conflicts, the damage with the conflict. Some conflicts that some damage will be even more overrepresented because they create more conflict, so they bring more attention to the media and to the journals.
Hello, I'm Miguel De Gabriel, I guess from University of Seville, but I'm already unemployed. Did you, I see this graph over here and I find something very alarming for me. Where are the rest of the taxa? I mean, did you filter them on purpose or you didn't find anything about mollusks, insects, and I guess you have thought about this and.
Yeah, sorry, maybe I didn't emphasize this, but we just focus at this point on vertebrate tetrapods. So that's why we didn't include mollusk and.
Okay, I agree that, but
Why?
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 Because lots of damage on agriculture and human health are produced by insects or crustaceans or several mussels here. I don't know. There's a lot of important things leave behind if you focus on the great visible mammals and birds.
Yeah, that's also related with the first questions. We focus on vertebrate tetrapods because at this point, what we wanted to, in a further step, what we want to do is to compare with, as I was saying, to give an index of importance to each damage or to each activity that is affected, and cross somehow or see the relation with the species traits, as I was saying in my lab. So we started. On the future, we will go probably with other groups, but we started with this because we believe that the demography, for example, the global trends or the trends or population trends and country levels are more at the date are more better known. So we just focus on that because we have more information on their ecology, but also on their demography. But you make a good point. I mean, probably the damage of these tetrapods is much less important in terms of quantity and economically, for sure. But for understanding, sometimes we don't have to go to the ones that cause more, but to the ones that we can understand more.
I'm sorry, I will have to stop there because we have a lady in the second row who had a question.
Hi, I'm Nuria Selva from University of Huelva and Polish Academy of Sciences. Thank you for this nice overview. And I just wanted you to comment very short on the damage to biodiversity. I have always, because damage has a human perspective, and then how native fauna or wildlife can cause damage to biodiversity.
Yeah, that for us was a little bit required a little bit of thinking because we found many publications on that and fall under the terms wildlife and damage, and was not on any human activity. Was, for instance, thinking in the damages that are caused by rabbits in Australia, for instance, or the American mink here, the American bison here. The authors consider it a damage because they at some point they said they cause damage to the ecosystems. Okay, it's not a human activity. It's a kind of a difficult kind of damage, but we included because the authors consider it as a damage, probably because they will imply an economic investment in fixing this, or trying to fix this damage.
But then this was always related to alien species when you found this term?
Not always. For instance, also elephants, elephants that the authors consider it a damage because they are destroying a forest or modifying a forest. Then we have to look. I mean, that's very, very relative to what the authors consider damage. Or many kangaroo species in Australia.
We have the last quick question.
Again, so human values are changing. So what's valuable today may not be very valuable in the future. So like carbon is not taken into account, but very near future it will. It will be a loss and damage if carbon sequestration is somehow reduced. But in the moment it's not a damage yet in your calculations, right?
Sorry, I didn't
So
understand.
if there is a negative influence of these processes, for instance on carbon cycling, in the moment that doesn't count. But very near future it will count. But how do you consider these changes in values in the human society?
Don't know how to answer this question because at this point we didn't consider anything. We just consider what the research community is considering now as a damage. Most probably, if this will be the case, this will change. And in fact, we see when we look at the date of the publication, we see some changes. We see that, for instance, the leisure activities are gaining in importance. The damage to leisure activities are gaining in importance in the last years. And most probably, when this will come, this will start appearing in the literature. This was just a first approach to do things with raw data.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Now we are going to hear a proposal about the data integration. And this speaker works also as researcher in the Doñana Biological Station. Welcome to Alberto García-Rodríguez. Thank you also very much for the interesting questions that you are posing to our speakers.
Okay, good morning. I hope everyone listens to me well now. I don't know if the microphone is working well. Okay. So my name is Alberto Garcia. I'm working with Miguel De Gabriel and with Heterogeneity in the Doñana Biological Station. I'm going to narrow down from a global perspective to a Spanish perspective of the damage situation. So biodiversity monitoring is important for both establishing conservation objectives and also for the implementation of an adaptive management that can allow us to reach these objectives. Just to briefly remind you that adaptive management basically consists on integrating experimental design into the management, so we can monitor this management and we can adjust the management continuously. We can play with different hypotheses and we can at the end adapt the management depending on the situation and on the data that we are gathering. So one of the problems with the adaptive management is that we can find important biases and spatio-temporal mismatches between the information that we are gathering and the actual conservation needs. So this, for instance, is this is not working. Anyway, this is a paper from 2018 in which the authors were comparing the spatial mismatch between the biodiversity and the productivity of some protected marine areas and the degree of protection of these areas. And what they found is that usually there is a mismatch. Some areas are under-protected and some areas are over-protected according to the levels of protection of productivity and biodiversity. One important thing of the adaptive management is if the cycle fails, if one component of the cycle fails, the whole process fails, so adaptive management is not properly used. For our case, which is important, is that we are talking about collecting information. So if we are not collecting properly the information that we want to analyze for the adaptive management, the whole process of the adaptive management will fail. We think in this context that wildlife damages are a very good example in biodiversity monitoring because they have consequences for both the society and the ecosystem services. For society they are important because they can affect the human daily life, and also for the biodiversity and for the ecosystem they are important because if the damage is caused by specific species are very important, they can compromise the conservation of these species and they can compromise the ecosystem functions that they are providing. Considering this, the main goal of this project is to assess the degree of cohesion, completeness, accuracy, and accessibility of crucial biodiversity information, in this case wildlife damages, that are collected by different administrations. So for this we have asked to 102 different Spanish entities. Most of them they are local administration from the different autonomous communities, so, and a few they are from national administrations such as the Spanish Institute of Toxicology. We also asked to public companies such as the one that are related to the public transport, and also we asked to a live project, which is the Iberian Links project, that they are gathering all the information about damages caused by the Iberian Links in the whole Iberian Peninsula. So the first important thing here is that almost half of the companies, they did not reply to us. So even if we call them, they said, okay, yeah, send to us a mail, and in a few weeks we prepare a report. This report never arrived. The second important thing is that when we focus only on the administration that actually answered to us, there is an important proportion of the respondents that they did not have the data, and they refer to another administration within the local government. And among the 102 applications that we sent, only 20% of the entities actually have data about damages in Spain. One interesting thing is that we found an important bias concerning both the species and the type of damage that is reported in Spain. So, for instance, damages caused by large carnivores and by ungulates that are hunted, they are regularly reported by the different administrations, regardless of the autonomous community, while another damages that are usually well known and they are even appearing in the press media, such as the burrows that the rabbits are building next to the roads, that they are causing damages in the roads. If I remember well, only one administration sent to us data about the damages that are causing the rabbits, while this is something that is regularly appearing in the media. Another result is that when we compare damages that are reported by different administrations, but that they are caused by the same species, the fields that are reported by each of the administrations is very different. So here I put the example of the brown bear damages in two autonomous communities, and the number of variables that each of the administration is gathering is completely different. There are some administrations that they are gathering only 4 or 5 variables, while there are others that they are writing down up to 20 different variables. So this makes us to think that a wide variety of protocols, metadata, and data collection methods make data integration very challenging. No? So several administrations and different species causing damages will difficult much to standardize all the information gathered and to really implement a proper adaptive management. And additionally, when we focus on the protected species, what we see is that usually the information about damages is gathered at smaller spatial scales than the current conservation plans. And as a good example, this is a paper that it was published recently, less than half a year ago, by people working in the Doñana Biological as well, in which they were discussing, one of the key points of the paper is that they discussed that the current conservation plan of the brown bear only covers the 50% of the distribution area of the brown bear nowadays, because the brown bear in the Cantabrian mountain increased the population in the last 20 years. So now the current conservation plans only covers 50% of the actual territory, which means that they will have problems, for instance, for paying compensation in case of a damage occur out of the distribution range that is mentioned in the conservation plan. Okay. So just to end this talk, I would want to highlight that after the information that we gathered, we are working in two different things. The first one is we are trying to build a data sharing and mobilization system with the aim of facilitating the researchers to put in contact with the people that are actually having that information. So we will probably just in a Word document put all the contact information of the people that have the data and which type of data they actually have. So we don't have to send 30 mails to ask for a data, and also I think that this will ease also the administration and the contact will be more fluid. And the second thing is that we are trying to establish some criteria to unify all the data that is gathered about damages in Spain to build a standardized database with some minimum fields that we think that should be reported regardless the type of damage and regardless the species that we are talking about. This was everything. I want just to summarize that the title of the meeting was Threats and Challenges to Biodiversity and Ecosystem Conservation from a science perspective. So if we modified a little bit the message, I want to conclude that using science may be useful to minimize the threats and challenges to biodiversity and ecosystem conservation.
Thank you very much. Now we have the time for questions. Peter?
Yeah, thank you. So a remark and a question maybe. So it seems that it would also be interesting to do the reverse study how animals affect humans and cause damage, but how humans cause damage to natural populations would also be an interesting study, I think. The question that I have is how do you see that the results that you're getting will enter policies? I mean, how will it help to know the damages that is incurred by certain species on certain human activities? Because it seems to be mostly a negative message that you will be transmitting to policymakers, for instance. How can we reverse that idea? How does it help?
This is something that we will have to talk in the next months because the reality is we are just getting the data now. So we have been asking for the data for the last 2 years, 1 year and a half. And now that we can say that we finished collecting the data, is the time to think about, but this is very preliminary, so we have to think about how to reverse the situation and how to talk with the management, with the managers, and sit with them probably.
So the challenge is, can you convince people that you can combine less damage with more biodiversity? Do you think?
I think
that would be the ideal situation, of course. So, yeah.
I think that this is more a comment than a question, right? I mean, I would sign for this, for sure.
Yeah, but this has to do. But this is a good point. I mean, more the biodiversity, less damage. But in my last slide, I was pointing a little bit in that direction. I mean, if we understand what are the drivers of the damage, we see that that has much to do about biodiversity. An ecosystem with high biodiversity will be more likely to have less problems or species that get out of demographic, get to demographic numbers that imply increasing damages. It would be like a kind of safety measure. To have more biodiversity will imply less species out of control, like rats in the rice fields, and also the decrease in biodiversity, the decrease in wildlife and natural habitats is causing, in some cases, the damages of these species that are running out of space. So elephants is not that they go to the crops because they like it more, it's that because they don't have alternative resources, natural resources. So in essence we can say yes, biodiversity will improve, will reduce wildlife damage. Mostly.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor?
Hello, Javier Bustamante from Estación Biológica de Doñana. Very interesting talk. I would like to ask you what do you think if you said that many of the administrations didn't answer and provide any data of wildlife damage. To what extent do you think it's just because they don't have data or just because they don't want to share those data with you? And a second question related is to what extent administrations only have data of damage that they need to compensate economically and not of any other damages that are not regulated by law, any kind of compensation?
I will start with the second question. I think that the answer is yes. I think that most administration will gather information about the damages that they need to compensate. I think so. And about the first one, I have doubts, to be honest. I think that most administration probably they don't have the data, but we have, I didn't say, but there were two examples that they replied that they don't want to share the data, even when legally they are obliged to. So I think that these are exceptions, but we already found.
We have time for one last question.
Thank you. I am Maria Luisa Antequera from the University of Málaga. Your presentation I think is really interesting because I think this topic is really challenging, not only in this field, in biodiversity, in other fields, because I think the administration or different infrastructure probably have data regarding different topics, but we don't have access to this data. So I think it's really challenging. So my question is about, do you only think about asking for this to the administration, or do you think about looking for this data, for example, by internet, or asking other people, or bibliography, I don't know.
We start asking to the different departments, and also we went to these transparency offices. And when we didn't get any answer, we started looking also in the websites. But what I think with the information that is actually said in the website is that it's not that easy to find, even when it's there. Because there are a couple of examples that we were looking for some data, and when they replied, they sent to us a link that is open, and we did not find this link before. So we do really have to have the access to the people that they know where the link is.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we are going to move to the last speaker of this first topic. He's a freshwater ecologist, and he's going to talk us about invasive alien species and the importance for the management. He's a researcher at the Doñana Biological Station and a visiting fellow in rubber science in a university from UK. Welcome to Simone Guareschi.
Hello everybody, thanks for being here. I'm Simone, a mix of accents today and our English. I'm a freshwater ecologist in Doñana Biological Station, and today we're going to spend the next 15 minutes speaking about biological relations, species distribution model, and using red swan crayfish as model species. No need to speak in this forum about the massive challenge and implication of biological innovation at global and local scale, so I will move directly to the species distribution model that are important tools for studying biological innovation actually because of the results. In fact, they provide a map of suitability that may be very useful for detecting, for prevent further spread and detect future potential colonized area. We use to perform the species distribution model, we commonly use environment data, bioclimatic data, coupled with the presence data. It's common to apply future climate scenario to have this insight and help in early detection and monitoring, for example. But what if we try to use species distribution model using using both data from the past, bioclimatic data from the past, and occurrence data from the past? I say it's a good idea. It's a good idea, especially if you have a well-known species. In fact, if you have a well-known invasive species with data during a longer period of time, species distribution model can be very useful for this kind of species. So this widely known species can be very useful as model species to apply species distribution modeling, because you can validate the output across time, and it also allows to explore the niche trend of the species, for example, in terms of niche conservatism. And here is where our guy, red zone crayfish, Orca muscularity, may help us. It's a well-known species, its distribution data worldwide is well known, its route of invasion, its trajectory of invasion are well known. It's a decapod, it's native from southern US, northern Mexico, and successfully introduced in dozens of countries, mostly on the continent except Australia. We were able to get together records from the 1854 to 2022 for a total of 54,000 occurrences. And fun fact, the first introduction in Europe was here in Spain in 1973, in Extremadura, if I'm not wrong, and the next year, in 1974, was already detected in the province of Seville, for example. It was an authorized introduction by the government back in the day. We got this all the information thanks to our colleagues of Isabellian collaborator, by the way, 2020, and we updated this information with a specific literature review and a check on multiple biodiversity data. This was a funky zip, but being a PDF is not, you cannot appreciate so much, so I split in a couple of in a slide just to let you know the evolution of the distribution of the species. For example, in blue we have the records that are mostly in the native area in North America. We have some hundred of records, while in 2022 we have the 54,000 of records all over 4 continents and dozens of countries. Bit of methods here, as I mentioned, the occurrence came from our literature review plus the works of our colleagues. We obtain bioclimatic variable from CSIC database. We use kind of 35 bioclimatic variable. We use also the elevation raster at 10 arc-minus resolutions. We apply 4 different algorithms, ZLM, ZBR, random forest, and Maxent. And I'm gonna plot here and discuss here the ensemble model that was possible thanks to the biomod with the R packets biomod 2. After correlation analysis of this variable, we didn't use the total of 36 variables, we used just 7 variables that were not correlated. Here to sum up our idea, we split the past in 4 periods. Occurrence data up to 1950, occurrence data up to 1975, occurrence data up to 2000, and occurrence data up to the present date, 2032. After looking for duplicates and the spatial, and in a way to reduce spatial correlation, we finally obtained 78 occurrences before the first period, before 1950, and close to 3,000 occurrences for the last period, present day. As we know, the new occurrence in working in the past. In this exercise, we don't work toward the future, that has been already done. We use the past, we try to learn from the past. As we know the new quotation mark occurrence of the species through times, we can check if the species distribution model outputs were concordant with observed the expansion of the species at worldwide level. So this is the idea, and let's see some results. For example, starting for the tricky scenario, current no distribution of the species, using the knowledge during the 50s. So with just 78 records, which will have been the result? This will be the result, and obviously 78 records at worldwide level. It's kind of a bit tentative tricky map, but anyway, we can still stress some good level of suitability, some yellow-red color in Europe, that we all know that was then colonized during the 70s. With just 78 occurrences, we were able to predict the high suitability in South America that we already know nowadays that it's an area that should be under specific observation, but this information would have been possible with the information of 70 years ago. What if we move on the next scenario, using the information up to 1975? So, big change, with just 260 occurrences, the potential distribution of the species, our model, the output of our model, is pretty good. We have some yellow and dark yellow, red, meaning high suitability, in areas that we know will have been colonized during these days, like in Europe and Southeast Asia. And patterns even clearer and clearer using more recent data like knowledge up to 2000. Now, how can we assess all this information? There are different possibilities. For example, to sum up, to start, we're going to plot just a 54,000 occurrence worldwide. Easy way, I overlap with my maps, and this is the case. And we can see that using the information up to 2000, the models perform pretty well. Being in Spain and in Seville, we did a zoom, a specific zoom on the Iberian Peninsula and the Western Mediterranean, and we can see again the current known distribution of the species, the black dot, on a map obtained with the information from the 70s. And again, the models perform pretty well. If I look on North Italy, Southwest France, and South or Mediterranean Spain. The point coincide, there is an overlap between the point and the red zone predicted by our model. Another way is to just compare the value of suitability from cells that we know, where we know the presence of the species, versus random cells, and the cells with the presence of the species always overlap, always overperform the same amount of random cells in terms of suitability. We perform different Wilcox tests and FXI tests. We can also compare the overlap between two scenarios, for example. In orange, for example, is the overlap between the high suitability obtained with the data just at 1950 and the high suitability obtained with the current known knowledge. So we can see that at least 30% is already predicted thanks to the information obtained with the past data. This overlap increased from 27% to 37% using data from the 70s, and it's above 70% using data from 2000. And finishing split is showing also the niche. We complicate a little bit more stuff, working also on the niche. We summarize the biothematic environmental variable into two axes in order to plot the niche in a multidimensional space. And we can see in violet like the stability of the niche throughout time. From the 50 to the 70 to 2010, there is a stability of the niche represented by the violet color. Here the result of different tests, the equivalency test and similarity test, stress again, together with a high level of stability, that is the violet area here, some kind of niche conservatism of the species throughout time. The same with the table. I have a couple of minutes maybe. In a couple of minutes, we quantify what we have seen before. The overlap decrease with the time, but the stability remained very high, 95, 99%. The expansion, that was the blue line here, sorry, blue area here, the light blue area, that we didn't specify, apologies, was the expansion, was limited, kind of 5%. So altogether, this result stress and niche conservatism, even though the equivalency test specifically was not significant. So interesting stuff. But probably this test is very exigent, it's very demanding. So to sum up on my last two slides, I remember my aim was to validate species distribution model across time and to explore the niche trend of the species. present range predictability increase as time frames were closer. An increase in distribution data knowledge brings to accurate and better map. Species distribution model calibrated with record from the early stage of invasion tend to under-predict the potential range of the species. However, we can have good clues from data from the 70s. For example, had anyone collected crayfish records in 1970 and had the climatic scenarios 2022, concordant projection of present-day range would have been obtained. It would have been very useful for anticipate reactor. We were able also to stress a new area with high suitability not invaded yet, South America, East Mediterranean region, and Australasia. And I would like to stress the relevance and the crucial role of long-term dataset in providing insight for better predicting biological invasion. Allow me to thank the project that support my research, and I'm happy to discuss this topic.
Now we open the floor for questions. Any questions for our last speaker?
Simone, I'm Simone Santoro from the Universidad de Huelva. I was wondering, when you use your bioclimatic variables to make predictions for the future, for example, when you use data until 1950, you're using the values of the bioclimatic variables at that time or in the future? How we...
It's tailored. It's tailored. It's I passed it. Tailored. I didn't say that. When I used data from 1950, I put the blue bar. Means I didn't use exactly climatic temperature of climatic variable of 1950. We use a more robust approach. We use, this is the blue bar, sorry. We average the previous 10 years. So for the 50, I average the previous 10 years, 1941, 1950. For the 75, we average the previous 10 years, and so on, because, you know, it pick up just 1 year, it can be particularly dry, it can be particularly wet, so to be more robust, we use a dynamic. We didn't use always the same climatic scenario. This was a good point of this research, in my opinion. We use dynamic scenario, and for each scenario, we average the previous 10 years. We think it is. For criticism, I think is the best way to apply.
Thank you. Any question? Yes.
Did you include any biological variables in your models, like interactions with other species or?
Thanks. Good point. Yes, obviously, now this is strictly a bioclimatic model with all the point that bring with it. We cannot take into account interaction, especially working at global scale, because sometimes interaction will be. Some interaction may work maybe in some area, not in another, so it's difficult to smoothly integrate, and also maybe we don't have until still capacity to fully integrate other stuff. Especially because we're working at the global scales. What we can add maybe, and what is not included either, is some ecophysiology boundary of the species, for example. This can be useful to improve our model, and these are available again. You need to make the assumption that the ecophysiology boundary of the species are always the same. But yes, not just bioclimatic and evolution. Good.
One more question.
Thanks a lot, great study. So I like it a lot. And we biologists, we tend to ignore the largest source of uncertainty, which is human behavior, of course. And could you just turn it around and conclude if there's really niche conservatism, then the species didn't change its ecological behavior a lot, but it filled the niches. But it didn't jump, so it didn't fly, it was brought there somehow. So the delay of occurrence in these areas that are obviously fit or became fit during the time for this species could be explained by, well, differences in human behavior, or whether they would be interested in this great fish or transport it or establish it. Do you think that this is possible?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not going to fly, it's going to be transported, it's going to be officially introduced for some period in space by the government back in the day, like a resource, like a food resource. But anyway, you can introduce whatever you want, but you need to. Here is where the species has suitable area. So you can maybe, and it's fun that the first introduction in Europe is in the 70s, and exactly was the best area. I don't know if how did they know, never did they know that, but except South America, it was the best area, at least all over the world, 90% of those years. Human knew, back in the day, they knew where to introduce successfully. Probably a lot of attempts in Africa has been done, a lot of attempts, some successfully, some not. The role of the human in transport the species is crucial, but maybe except South America, the coast of South Africa, because it's already sited in South Africa, but not in the coast, in Australia, already occupy most of the available niche, the available bioclimatic space, sorry, except South America. Even though in Brazil it's already sited very recently, it has been sited in Brazil, but not Uruguay, Argentina, that is over there. In order to
and local competitors?
Local competitor, this is the biggest one of the biggest invertebrates, so not among invertebrates for sure, but it's after the production of otters, for example, or waterboards that may regulate a little bit its populations.
Thank you. Time for the last question. Quick question.
Yeah, so you mentioned introductions. So I was wondering something else, and that is the difference between finding a species or not, of course, it depends on whether its growth rate is above 1 or below 1. And so does it have a chance somewhere or not? So if the match is very good between the environmental data and the occurrence, it suggests to me that the introductions were really everywhere, and everywhere where it could start to grow. At some point it arrived there. Only in some cases it survived and was able to grow, and in other cases it was not able to grow. So is that a valid conclusion, do you think? Do you think that there's sort of...
Yeah, probably yes. It's incredible. The interest of human in transport and grow these species, so probably yes, they try in all the continent, and there is where we were successful in the 54,000 records nowadays.
Thank you very much, Simone. Before we convey here again at 20 to 12, I would like to join me in applause to these 4 interesting species. So thank you very much. Welcome again. Now we are going to start the second topic of this morning. It is on animal biology and behavioral traits. And we have 4 speakers, and I only have 2 next to me. I want to make sure that all of them are here. We have a third one, and we will find out the missing one soon. Our first speaker is a very experienced researcher. He's working more than 30 years. He's now a researcher at the Doñana Biological Station of CSIC. And he's also the deputy director of the unique scientific and technical infrastructure, Doñana Biological Research. I hope he's here with us. He's not here with us. Javier Bustamante is not...
Well, he is very
He was there?
He was there in the bathroom. He will appear.
Okay. Okay. Then we will move to the second speaker. He is going to compare the movement strategies of two different creatures. He's a PhD student at Doñana Biological Station, and his main focus is the study of the movement of these two types of creatures. Welcome, Daniel García-Rodríguez.
Hi everyone, thanks for the opportunity to come here. So I will have the opportunity to present the preliminary results of one of the chapters of my thesis entitled Movement Strategies of Lesser and Common Kestrels Across the Annual Cycle. And to our knowledge, this study results very interesting because it's the first time in which we compare both species using tracking data from GPS devices and also using the annual cycle, not only focusing, for example, in the breeding or non-breeding season. The comparison between these two species results very interesting because despite being very similar in several traits, such as sexual dimorphism or hunting techniques, they are also rather different in terms of behavior and ecology. On one hand, the lesser kestrel is a colonial breeder and a long-distance migrant, also considered a specialist in hunting large insects such optorthers like grasshoppers and beetles, and also really linked to several steppe habitats. On the other hand, the common kestrel is considered a resident in the southern half of the Iberian Peninsula, where we studied both species, and also it's a solitary breeder. It inhabits almost any habitat that holds prey, such as micromammals, reptiles, etc. The study areas were in two regions of Spain. The first one in the upper panel is Extremadura, and we studied lesser kestrels thanks to the project Live Cepa Urban, who give us that tracking data, in 3 colonies that are considered urban special protection area for birds, which is really interesting because in this case they do not try to protect habitats but historical buildings that were used by lesser kestrels. And in the second, in the second panel we can see the 2 study areas where we studied mixed colonies of lesser and common kestrels. One of them is in Huelva, Palma del Condado, and the other one is in Seville, the northern part of Doñana National Park. The first thing we needed to do was divide the annual cycle into different periods. So we use information collected due to monitoring fieldwork, that's for the breeding season, and it accounts for 33% of the annual cycle. So we divide it into courtship, incubation, and chick rearing and post-fledging period. On the other hand, in the non-breeding season, we use data mainly from lesser kestrels, migration, also spring and autumn migration, and also from common kestrels, because we recently described that some individuals of common kestrels, which I have already said that is considered as sedentary, can perform some types of seasonal movements. So we also use those dates and divided the non-breeding season into post-breeding, where lesser kestrels mostly gather in pre-migratory areas and some common kestrels perform these seasonal movements. Winter, where lesser kestrels spend the winter in Sahel, in Africa, mainly in Mali, Mauritania, and Senegal, and then the pre-breeding, which comprises the spring migration of lesser kestrels, and common kestrels mostly stay at their breeding grounds. The next step was to resample all this data to 1 hour interval in order to compare different periods, because we use different sampling frequencies. So we consider a minimum number of diurnal locations. 8 during spring and summer, that is the breeding periods and post-breeding, because the number of daylight hours was maximal and thus tag performance, and 6 or more for wintering and breeding periods. The aim of this threshold to consider a tracking day was to have a broad picture about the movements of the kestrels, not having just few locations during the day, because it can give us a misleading clue. And finally, we excluded traveling days, mainly migratory days or commuting flights really long outside the breeding season, because we aim at comparing the movement strategies not related to these events such as spring migration or autumn migration in lesser kestrels, or seasonal movements in common kestrels. So just to give a quick glimpse about the data, the tracking data set, we can say that in total we have around 130 individuals with almost 20,000 days and more than 500 combinations. I call combination to the result of individual period and year. For example, one lesser kestrel, 1170, the courtship in 2018. So it's a huge data set in which we can try to assess and compare the strategies. So finally, before explaining the main results, I would like to introduce which were the movement parameters that we estimated. And it's really important to focus that they were at daily scale, okay? So during breeding season, we studied the maximum distance to the nest, that is the farthest location recorded along the day with respect to the nest box, and the nest attendance. For that, we consider a 50-meter buffer around the nest box, so every time a position is collected, we estimated the percentage at daily scale. And then for the annual cycle, we also estimated cumulative distance, that is the sum of distances between points, the minimum convex polygons in 150% isoplates, turning angle that give us the information about changes in direction between movement, between locations, and this is kind of important in the sense that normally commuting flights or directive movements have low values because they do not change really the direction, whereas other paths, for example, trying to search food during prospection of an area, it's a more tortuous path, so the values are higher. Stationary behavior was defined as the percentage of locations in which the distance between points was less than 200 meters, because we wanted to assess the number of hours, more or less, because we know it's a resample, it doesn't give us like the actual information about what the bird did, but at least have an idea about how many hours the birds spend at some points. And we can assume that they are resting, preening, perching, and finally roosting behavior. Roosting behavior was a categorical variable in which we could distinguish if the bird roosted in the same area or not. So for the results, here we see courtship, and it can give us a clue about the general patterns along the annual cycle. For example, lesser kestrels always show higher values for cumulative distances, maximum distance to the nest, and both MCPs. And they are also spending more time at the nest, which is normal because they are colonial breeders, used to spend a lot of time around the nest. Also, turning angles are quite lower than common kestrels because as they prospect larger areas, they need to move more directionally. On the other hand, common kestrels used to spend more time resting and also using more the same spot for roosting over different times. Regarding sexual differences, we found that post hoc comparisons revealed that in MCP 100 and resting behavior, sexual differences only occurred in common kestrels. That gives us a clue about that the reproductive role specialization in common kestrels is stronger than in lesser kestrels. During incubation, it peaks the reproductive sexual role specialization, and we can find sexual differences in the first 4 parameters and also in resting behavior and roosting behavior. We see that regarding nest attendance and turning angles, there are never differences between sexes. Finally, one of the most important results from this work is that during the chick rearing and post-fledging periods, where species need to optimize their hunting strategies, the reproductive sexual role specialization is clearly stronger in common kestrels, because post-hoc comparisons doesn't reveal any sexual differences in lesser kestrels. Finally, during post-breeding, wintering, and pre-breeding, we didn't find important differences between sexes, only differences between species. And the most important to partnering wintering. Sorry for I need to shorten the talk because the time is ending. So, main conclusions: lesser and common kestrels differ in all parameters throughout the annual cycle, unless for roosting behavior, in courtship and incubation. And the most important differences between species occur during the non-breeding season, specifically wintering and pre-breeding, because kestrels show an itinerant lifestyle prospecting for food resources, whereas common kestrels remain in the same spot. Males and females only differ during the breeding periods, and finally, reproductive sexual role specialization is stronger in common kestrels. Thanks.
You have done it perfectly fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
You told me 5 minutes already.
Absolutely. Now the floor is open for questions. Remember to say your name and affiliation.
My name is Montserrat Vila and I come from the same institution, Estación Biológica de Doñana. Well, thank you very much. I wonder that you had many hours to process, so did you use any artificial intelligence tool to remove the hours that you were not interested?
It was made manually with code. So what we did is like we work with several GPS tags and also accelerometers. So the sampling frequencies were ranging from one location every second to one location every hour. So what I did is just use a function in which you say, okay, every hour take 1 point, and it goes straight throughout the whole dataset. Because otherwise we couldn't compare the parameters across the annual cycle, which is the main point of this study.
Any other question? Yes.
Good morning, Vanessa Marocco, LifeWatch ERIC. It's only a curiosity because I will talk also later in my presentation. Why did you choose the minimum convex polygon as estimators with an animal tracking datasets?
Because, wait, it works now. Ah, okay. The minimum convex polygon, I am aware that is not the best estimator for home ranges, but in our study, remember that it's a daily scale. So we are talking about from 6 to 12, 13 locations. So what we want to say is like the extent of movement of the birds, how it changes across the annual cycle, instead of really having a method to say, okay, they move around, I don't know, 2 hectares. Because for like other methods like kernel density estimators, kernel density estimators, and so you need more data, like 30 points or so. So for our daily scale of analysis, it's not the best, I am aware, but we do not try to prove like, you know, some habitat use or this kind of techniques.
We have time for more questions. No more questions? Okay, so thank you very much for your presentation. Now we are going to come back to our previous speaker. He already presented you and your experience. He's also working with kestrels, so welcome, Javier Bustamante.
Well, sorry for the delay. I thought I was just understood wrong the time of my talk. Well, I will try to get into the. So, well, we continue with the kestrels, and in this case we are going to talk about lesser kestrel.
the idea, we have been doing research in the Doñana Biological Station with this model species for more than 30 years. And what I'm going to present is not only my work, but that of other colleagues from the Doñana Biological Station and also from the University of Huelva. And I would like to say that we have been working with lesser kestrels for a long time, and we know a lot about the breeding season and how they behave, but we know relatively little of what they do during winter. In this case, we are going to talk about movement ecology of this species, and especially in winter. So I will introduce the question, although my colleague Danny has been talking about the two species. Lesser kestrel is a small colonial falcon. They are insectivorous, they eat large insects, and they are migratory. They breed, their breeding range extends from the western Mediterranean in Spain and Portugal to Asia, going as far as Peking, and it's a species specialized on open habitats, mainly grasslands, steppes, and pseudo-steppes. And they winter in Africa, mainly south of the Sahel, so it's considered a trans-Saharan migrant. There are some populations, especially in the Mediterranean, in which part of the individuals do not migrate, so they are considered a partial migratory species. In the case of Andalusia, in which we have studied this with more detail, we know that around 25% of the individuals will remain in winter close to the breeding colonies, in places where in winter the conditions are cold, so there is a reduction in the food, in the availability of insects. While some individuals, most of them, will migrate south of the Sahel to areas where we would consider up to 75% of the individuals, to areas where the temperatures are much higher and the abundance of insects are supposed to be greater. The fact is that they risk carrying a 3,000 to 4,000 kilometer migration going across the Mediterranean Sea and the Sahara Desert. They don't avoid these barriers, but they cross them. And actually, one idea why this is actually dangerous is how fast they migrate. So they instead of reducing the amount of energy they expend, for example, in the case of raptors flying during the day and using soaring as a way of reducing the energy, they will mainly migrate by flapping and to a great extent during the night. So they are both diurnal and nocturnal migrants. They cross deserts in areas that they take them up to 1 or 2 days to cross the desert, but in this way. So what about our methods? We have information about 57 kestrels that were marked with GPS tags during several winters from 2016 to 2022. Most of these individuals migrated. So in 2021, we decided to capture birds during the winter to have some information about resident birds. The GPS trackers provide data at different sampling scales, but we use only data from 1 fix per hour. And we are analyzing just 3 variables, so the daily accumulated distance and the home ranges, weekly home ranges. In this case, we use kernel density estimates, 50% and 95% kernel density estimates. We use generalized linear mixed models to compare resident versus migrant birds. So, which is our hypothesis? So, we are thinking that if the majority of kestrels risk taking a 3,000 kilometer migration, crossing the Sahara Desert and the Mediterranean Sea to reach areas south in the Sahel, we expect that they are probably going there because the abundance of food is much greater. It's a better place to spend the winter. So we would expect that the birds don't need to travel so far during the foraging. So the accumulated distance, the accumulated distance, and also the home range will be probably smaller of these migrant individuals compared to resident ones. So what about our results? We analyzed first the daily accumulated distance, and we find that in this case, migratory birds show smaller accumulated distance, especially at the beginning of the wintering. Although this increases during the winter, and at the end they reach much greater values. This is in agreement with birds probably using a perching strategy for foraging at the beginning, and probably moving later to more flight hunting, probably in cases where the food abundance is lower or where there's greater competition between individuals. On the other hand, the birds that are resident, they don't show a significant temporal trend and have a much larger values on accumulated distance. And what about home ranges? Here we show some home ranges in Africa, in the Sahel. And the results, in the left side you have the raw data, in the right side you have the estimates of the linear models. We compare when we use both the 50% and 95% kernel density estimates of weekly home ranges. And you can see what we get is that there are no sexual differences in home ranges. There are significant differences between resident and migratory birds. And also there are also significant temporal trends. Actually, we get a significant interaction between migratory behavior and temporal trend. The main result we get is that the resident birds show larger home ranges, especially in the winter, so in December. These differences are not so clear at the beginning or at the end. So as you see there, as marked with the red arrows, in the middle of the winter, clearly resident birds have much larger home range than migratory birds. So our hypothesis is partially supported. Home ranges are significantly larger for resident versus migrants in December. These differences are not so clear in November, when birds are probably arriving to the wintering areas and probably have to search for the good places to feed. So in at the initial stage, they might probably have larger home ranges where they find the good spots. And also probably at the end is a time when birds are already starting to move to start migration, so probably that's why also we don't find a clear difference. Accumulated daily distance are significantly larger for resident versus migrants, especially at the beginning of the wintering period. Migrant values increase along the winter, probably because there is an increase in competition or a decrease in food supplies. Another thing we find is that we don't have any significant differences between the sexes, so both sexes behave in a similar way. And something that has to be taken into account is that resident data are limited to just one winter, and probably there are very strong differences between years. So especially in the wintering areas south of the Sahel, we know that the conditions are probably very variable from year to year. So probably having data from all years will probably give us a clearer picture. So just to end, we have to acknowledge the collaboration of many different institutions and different projects that have provided data from Kessels they have marked. Usually, marking the Kessels is something expensive, and it has been carried by different projects that have provided us with data. And especially Sunhal has provided data for the birds that we marked, the resident birds we marked in winter in Doñana. So thank you very much.
Any questions for our speaker? Peter?
So I was wondering the difference between migratory and resident birds. And there could be other differences as well among them. I think that, for instance, the birds that are in a less good condition, for instance, tend to stay, and that is causing the differences also in foraging strategy. Is that possible, do you think?
Well, it could happen, but probably if it's certainly we don't know. it would happen that birds, as you say, birds in bad conditions remain here in winter, which probably would increase in their mortality, and something we'd like to probably study. It has also been said that probably older individuals might remain here just because to defend the nest and being able to be here earlier. But yeah, certainly, one of the things we know is that there have been records of birds staying here in winter for a long time. So we know some papers published in the late 1800s already referring birds staying in winter in the south of Spain and in Morocco. And we don't see that there has been an increase in the proportion of the population that remains in winter.
Two more questions.
Thank you. Are there resident populations in other European countries?
Well, I don't really know. As far as I know, that they are not resident in Italy, or there might be very few records. We know that in Morocco there are, and probably, well, the populations in other European countries are small, so it might, even there are a few individuals that remain, might be not just overlooked, I would say.
You said that your results partially support your hypothesis. So I wonder how much partially, what is the percentage of the unexplained, so to say, part of the variability? And if this is more than, let's say, 20%, what do you have in mind as the next step?
Yeah, well, I say partially because in our as we stated our hypothesis that were completely previous to analyze the data, we expected that there would be very clear differences, and we find clear differences, for example, in home range in December, but not so clear in November and January. We have some ideas of why this might happen, but because, for example, lesser kestrels, when they arrive, they move until they find a place with suitable food supplies. And we imagine that there might be quite big differences from year to year, so the birds have to find a good spot. But we have to analyze those data in detail. Also, as we expect that there might be strong differences between years, well, we have only data from residents in 1 year in Spain, which might have been a good year, for example, I would say. So having data from more years would probably, I would expect these things to go to the mean, so have stronger differences.
We have another question in the last row.
I was wondering if the resident birds have a different behavior during the breeding season than the ones that migrate. Maybe they have different characteristics.
Yeah, well, in this case, very few of the birds that we marked, we marked just 11 birds, continued breeding the next year, and we don't have data of those birds, so what happened. But what we know, as there have been some other works carried with resident and migratory lesser kestrels in the area, and there has been a paper published by the group of Aldina Franco, and they didn't find any differences in breeding success between residents and migratory birds. So actually, I would say I wouldn't expect to get big differences, because if there were any big differences, all the population would switch to one or the other strategy. So if the fraction is stable, I would say that there must be some kind of compensation.
Time for the last question. No question? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to present us another example on the use of LifeWatch as an infrastructure to facilitate collaboration. He's a high-performance computing expert for the Institute of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Dynamics of the University of Amsterdam. He's a research software engineer actively involved with the Animal Movement Ecology Group at the University of Amsterdam. Welcome, Christian Byers.
Thank you. Dear audience, my connection with LifeWatch lies in the transfer of tools, expertise, and methodology to a virtual research environment in an attempt to lower the barrier to collaboration in radar aeroecology. I'm by no means a bird person myself. I work with a talented group of individuals who ask exciting questions and find unique methodologies for finding answers. I support them in their quest by alleviating the technical difficulties and constraints which present themselves when trying to answer continental phenomena. The intent is to produce a virtual research environment which allows other curious individuals to ask similar questions without being bogged down by the technicalities of such research. But before we dive into the actual technicalities, I would like to preface by why people are interested in radar aeroecology in the first place. The airspace is getting increasingly crowded for aerial organisms. Infrastructure that we build, such as aviation airfields, high-rises, and wind turbine parks, negatively impact aerial organisms. In order to understand the patterns and underlying processes, large amounts of data need to be analyzed in order to make an important decision about mitigation of conflicts in these aerial organisms. This could produce results such as early warning systems for aviation and wind turbine curtailment for wind parks. In order to do so, meteorological radars have been used for the past 60 years to understand and analyze the movement of insects, bats, and birds. There's a vast network of meteorological radars out there which constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, monitor our sky. For the past 3 to 4 years, we have been developing our own infrastructure at our own university, which has seen a transition of scale. We went from 3 colleagues having 15 gigabytes worth of a data set on each of their respective laptops to a central data repository of nearly 90 terabytes worth of curated meteorological radar data. Also added to that, subsequent tooling and derivatives to extract biological echoes. Such an infrastructure has a number of challenges. There are multiple services and servers, databases that all need to be maintained and upgraded. Technological advances need to be incorporated, sometimes causing the retraining of colleagues into a new methodology. Furthermore, having a complex infrastructure also requires quite a fair amount of administration. This administration seemingly is a necessary evil to ensure that the compute environment is made safe and secure. However, even if we were able to circumvent this rigidity of a system, we would still be met with another barrier, which would be the use of complex frameworks and tooling. This requires a moderate understanding of code and possibly training. The solution that we are working on is a virtual research environment for radar aeroecology. This is a place where domain experts make a collection of functional blocks and workflows to allow other users to quick start and start asking questions. The radar aeroecology virtual research environment is built on top of the NavIRI Notebook as a virtual research environment platform, and we are in the process of transferring existing code on a one-to-one basis to this VRE. The intent here is to build small Lego blocks, small enough such that we can use them in a variety of workflows, and on top of that, certain tools are being added which help with concurrency. Things like splitters and mergers, or because some processes are optimal for being parallelized, whereas some do not. Hopefully this reduces the computational threshold required for anybody that wants to use the system. Technically, there is no requirement of being able to code. Anyone can and create or review existing code though. The way this works is that small blocks behave like functions, like any other programming language. A collection of these blocks could also is similar to a library of functions. In this case, this is a catalog. The catalog of blocks can be used in a workflow manager, A workflow manager allows a user to connect these blocks with lines, and the workflow manager will then manage the execution of all of these blocks and the communication between them. Yet again, a user can visually make a workflow without touching a piece of code. The way that this works is that there is a cell code analyzer. This is an example of a Jupyter Cell notebook in which I built a lister for radar files for the Royal Dutch Meteorological Institute. This code analyzer will analyze which variables are marked as an input and which should be an output. Furthermore, dependencies and parameters in configuration are automatically handled, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. Currently, in the radar air ecology virtual research environment, we've added the following blocks. We can index our Royal Dutch Meteorological Institute's repository. We can download any of those files. We can convert them towards R format. We also have the community established tool Valtenberg up and running as a single block, which produces vertical profiles. And furthermore, we can have local repository indexing, which would mean if you have submitted your own radar data, you would also be able to treat them just as if you were pulling them from remote. And we have a visualizer written in Python. This results in a couple of workflows. This results in that you are now able to download any file for any radar in the Netherlands. Furthermore, any radar that is stored in the virtual research environment can also be visualized. And lastly, we can already produce a few derivatives, such as a vertical profile, from any radar in that area. What we were working towards is the expansion of the set of blocks. We're working to expand the repository indexer, as the Netherlands is not the only country that has a public repository of meteorological radar data. We're adding Denmark and Germany as well. A more thorough and in-depth file check will allow for more robustness and quality control of polar volumes. BioRed Visualizer, which is written in R, will also be added, which is a community standard for visualization of meteorological radar data, especially for biological echoes. We'll also add a parameter recalculation, vertical profile customization, block performance tracking, block triggering, and our own UVA radar package. This could result in a couple of extra workflows. For example, the real-time data acquisition and visualization for a multitude of radar. A combined visualization where we will plot multiple radars in a single map, and a range bias correction, which is an advanced product which accounts for the distance, the lack of accuracy over distance. So currently, we are in the process of our own use case, which is a data exploration use case in which we try to identify artifacts. Sometimes our researcher attributes a data artifact to a faulty sensor. However, there is a growing belief that this might not always be the case, and it might actually be a piece of behavior that we cannot attribute to the data yet. So what we would ideally like to see is a real-time pipeline which would provide us with a visualization or multitude of visualizations and be able to identify any of these artifacts occurring. We would then be able to retrieve an exact location, and as it is real time, we would actually be able to go into the field and have an in-field observation of the phenomenon. If we were to build this into a virtual research environment, it could look something like this. From left to right, we would first start by retrieving the most recent measurements of a radar around our location. Then we'll retrieve those files, download them, and convert them to our format. Afterwards, we can start visualizing the full volume file and meanwhile spin off a branch that produces a derivative, a vertical profile. We can also visualize the vertical profile, which means that now we have a continuous pipeline that produces two different visualizations, which we can use to identify any anomalies. However, we also in the past had a collaboration with Globam and UVA. The request was to assist them into the processing of 15 terabytes worth of radar data, which consists or covers about 150 radars. This request was specifically for a dataset for alafdata.eu. There were a few requirements, administrative and technical. Administrative requirements meant that we would have to have these two engineers both as a guest researcher for our institute. Afterwards, these researchers would then have to be applied to our partners and compute infrastructure. Of course, compute hours and data storage quotas had to be set. After that, it is also retrieval of the actual code, the framework that needs to run all of this radar data, the compilation of the specific processes required to do so, module loading of the compute environment, library matching of the code, and instructions on how to contribute to the radar cluster project. Luckily for us, these two engineers were well versed in cloud computing and research and software development. So this process was smoothed out. However, we would like to see this process simplified, gain access, and start working. That same process could have looked something like this. This is a very minimal example, but what you could do is list all the plotter volumes which have been supplied, uploaded to any repository you like, introduce one of these concurrency tools, a splitter, and for each of these plotter volumes, spin off a processor that processes it into a desirable result. We're not there yet. We still have quite some work to do. We do hope that we can inspire other communities to do similar efforts, and we do hope to be able to have curious individuals ask questions without being bogged down by the technicalities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any question for our speaker?
Thank you for the presentation. So my name is Alberto García-Rodríguez from the Flanders Marine Institute of Belgium, and it was really interesting, this platform you're proposing. I just wondering if you can elaborate a bit more. For example, are you planning to do it as a community effort, put it on GitHub, something like that, like allow to other people to work on that, because I don't think it's only useful for one type of research, it can be useful for many more, or including digital twins of the ocean or terrestrials. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, so currently it's in a very early stage. So currently there is no immediate access or location where you can see this. The foundation, the basis, does revolve about open source and open access. So these individual components that you've seen just now are actually small Git repositories that are turned into a Docker container. So we're already working on making sure that each of these components are public and accessible. Afterwards, the collection of these individual blocks, called a workflow, will also be published as an open access and open start. So my expertise is on meteorological radar data. So I do not have a lot of experience in the part of terrestrial analysis, for example. But I could imagine that similar people in positions like I do will start making these virtual research environments specific to that case. The platform on its own is capable of doing so. So we are just merely an implementation of radar area ecology on the MapBeauty platform.
Any other?
So thank you for the presentation. I'm Julio Baneke from the ICT Core LifeWatch at Spain. And I have two questions, which are kind of the similar questions regarding how do you translate this for external users when they want to produce new workflows. So first, how are you managing the way that different kind of data interacts between blocks? So if I want to do this, I guess these are like time series or something. But if I want to apply to create a new block with images, are you ensuring that you receive this kind of data in specific workflows, or could I like break the system by introducing different data in there? And the second question, which is related, is how are you structuring the parallelization of the work? Because I saw that, and you were saying that you could have workflows that are highly parallel, or workflows that require a lot of CPU computation because are highly sequential. How are you managing that a new user that wants to produce a workflow, and they know how to program, but they don't know how to make HPC, how are the interactions between them? Linear period.
Great question. Okay, so first of all, breaking the whole system is something I actively try right now. This is because I want to find all the limitations of the system, and I actively work with the developers that work on the Nabi ERIC. It has been assured to me that technically I can't really break the system, I can just break my own workflow. Which would mean that if I would have to have a request to say, for example, process this data, and any of these blocks would fail, I can receive an alert in multiple dashboards down the line of which of these blocks actually failed. I've been speaking to them already about having a sort of a resubmission. If you fixed one of your blocks, you would not have to run through the complete analysis again. So these are sort of tools that are being introduced in order to safeguard and guarantee your environment. Technically, how other people will gain access and how will access and compute hours and data distribution and how much data are you able to store, these questions, I do not have an answer for. This is what I've spoken to management about this because obviously I'm curious on how far can we go, right? If I put a request for parallelization over 10-fold or 1,000-fold, there's a significant difference in the capabilities of the whole system. I've been told that these discussions are still need to take place, so the exact implementation of that I cannot tell you right now. But in general, anybody that can code is allowed to make code. They are in a pretty safe environment where they will not break the whole environment around them. They will at worst be met with this failed or this section failed. Have I answered your questions? Okay.
Last question.
So this is also a question for the future. Last week, it was the first time that a wind turbine park at sea was shut down temporarily because there was a prediction that there would be high amounts of birds flying over the North Sea. So I'm not sure the results will still have to come out of that, I think, but this already shows that systems like this, especially when you go on and it becomes real time, also have a connection and that we can really benefit from it. Also related to the talks that we heard this morning about the damage that can occur both ways, for humans as well as for birds. There are ways to reduce the damage at least if we have good systems in place. So I hope that in the future, when it's real time and working, it can be applied to many different cases as well. So, more a remark than a question there, sorry.
No problem.
Thank you. The last speaker of this session is going to present us a new approach for invasive alien species. She holds a PhD in ecology. She has been a postdoc in LifeWatch Italy, and on the top of that, she is the European Union Project Scientific Community Networking Officer at LifeWatch ERIC. Welcome, Vanessa Moreco.
Good morning, everybody. Life in the biosphere is regulated by ecological interactions that occur in space, but the encounter probability between individuals depends from the size and the overlap of their individual home range. In the other word, home range is the spatial expression of the behavior assumed by the animal to complete their life cycles. Larger animals have larger home range, which in turn must be large enough to satisfy their energetic requirement that is scaled positively with the body mass in a similar way to a metabolic rate, that is with a scaling exponent around 0.75. Unfortunately, in the aquatic ecosystem, the allometric relationships are far less, and the experimental analysis on the home range overlap are relatively limited. The relative influence of the intrinsic and extrinsic factor that affect the pattern of species behavior within taxa has been long debated in the scientific literature. Empirical evidence has shown that the scaling exponent vary widely across taxa, which suggests further hypotheses on the mechanism in place, such as the thermoregulation strategy, the foraging behavior, the coexistence, the trophic level, and so on. Different sample and home range estimation methods used by researchers often challenge between a mismatch between the home range estimator assumption and the nature of data collected. Many home range estimators widely used assume that the data are identically distributed and independently sampled. So, in the stark contrast, the modern animal tracking data set are often strongly autocorrelated. So, this incongruence between the home-range estimator assumption and empirical reality often lead to systematically underestimate the home-range. So here I'm presenting the result of a fine-scale field test based on the behavioral observation of the invasive species Calinectes sapidus, targeting the Aquatina lagoon, that is a coastal lagoon in the south of Italy, through the use of the acoustic telemetry system. Simplifying the acoustic telemetry consists of two main components, transmitters and receivers. Transmitters are electronic tags that broadcast a series of sound of pulses in the surrounding water that can be heard by a receiver within a range. To have a general overview, on the left you can see all the movements that individual made during the entire experiment, and on the right there is a focus on a single individual. Here you can see the circle that corresponds to the overall home range, different color, different individuals. And on the graph there are three simple linear regression with three different home range estimators: the minimum convex polygon, the kernel density estimation, and also the autocorrelated kernel density estimation. All the linear regression are statistically significant. The coefficient, the scaling exponent, is different, but in any case higher than 0.75. I know that here it's a bit confused, but in the next slide I will do a focus on a single individual. But to proper quantify the overlap between individuals, we choose to use only the autocorrelated kernel density estimation through the use of the Battaglia coefficient, that is a symmetric index range from 0, that means no overlap, to 1, that means full overlap. It's important to highlight that the overlap range between small individuals is so high. It's also high between small and big, but from the other side, the overlap between big individuals are significantly less. Here we are at inter-individual level, so it's the same individual during the time, and the inter-individual home range is strongly overlapped. Next step is intraspecific level, so different individual first day versus 1 week later. So okay, at the inter-individual level, the home range is strongly overlapped, but at intraspecific level, the individuals tend to take the distance between each other. And here is simple number and plot about what we have done, what you have seen now in the satellite maps. And concluding, since the metabolism is influenced by temperature in view of the recent scenario related to climate change, we can use the spatially explicit vision in order to have, for estimating the intraspecific variation. It's also important, I think, to create a collaborative network in order to standardize and harmonize the methods and the models that we use in the analysis of the behavior, in order to better understand the inter-intraspecific variation. So last, I want to thank you, LifeWatch Italy, LifeWatch Belgium, also University of Salento, the European Tracking Network, and also you for your attention.
Thank you very much. You have done it very good in time. Any questions for Dr. Morocco? Peter?
So I was wondering what your view is on whether the pattern that you see interspecifically between species is necessarily the same as within species. The size differences that you showed are fairly small, so we still find a trend. But I was wondering, is it reasonable to expect the same slope for small differences within species rather than comparisons among species?
We did a comparison between an indigenous species, Leafia verrucosa. They are similar in size, but with totally different habits. Carinetes avidus is a diurnal swimmer, active diurnal swimmer. Leafia verrucosa is a crepuscular nocturnal once worker, let's say. So we did also the overlap at interspecific level, and there is no overlap between these two species, but I didn't present today because we have few individuals, so it's not statistically strong yet, but we want to go on in this sense.
My question would be whether this pattern you see in the locomotion of the species changes along a disturbance continuum. Does it change or does it remain?
You mean a human disturbance continuum? So no, because fortunately this lagoon is managed by the university, so let's say that it's private. So we have no disturbance from common people, let's say.
Any other question? Let me thank you, Simone. Before closing the session, just to sum up, we have had this morning 2 sessions, 8 speakers. We have seen different angles on how is science help on biodiversity and ecosystem conservation. We have here about virtual research environments and digital twins, and also about virtual research environment on radar ecology and the importance. We have seen how e-tools could help on data aggregation, 2 different approaches for invasive alien species, and we have interesting discussions and presentations about wildlife damage, and also very interesting remarks, for example, the inclusion of carbon sequestration in this damage. So I would like to join me in thank you all the speakers of the 2 sessions and you for your collaboration.